I walked into the restaurant expecting warmth, laughter, and maybe some overcooked steak. You know, normal family dinner stuff. My wife, Claire, had spent weeks organizing this surprise gathering for me. Said it was a special occasion. Didn't tell me why, just that I'd love it. The moment I stepped inside, though, something was off. It wasn't obvious at first. The decor was nice. Candles flickering, fancy table settings, the kind of thing Claire loved. But the room? The people? Too quiet. That thick, heavy kind of quiet, like everyone just stopped talking about you before you walked in. Happy early birthday, babe. Claire beamed, giving me a quick kiss on the cheek. Her smile was bright, too bright. The kind she used when she was forcing it. Everyone else chimed in, but it felt weird. My sister-in-law, Rachel, barely met my eyes. My best friend, Mark, gave me a stiff hug and a weird pat on the back, like he was apologizing for something. My father-in-law, a man who usually downed whiskey like water, hadn't touched his glass. Something was off. I brushed it off. Maybe I was overthinking. Maybe Claire just wanted to do something special. But the way my gut twisted told me otherwise. Then, as I sat down, I caught the first real crack in the illusion. Across the table, a man I didn't recognize, tall, sharp-jawed, a little too comfortable, was looking at Claire. Not a casual glance. Not friendly. No, this was something else. The way his eyes lingered, the way she flicked her gaze toward him for just a second before looking away, like she didn't want to be caught, like she had something to hide. I felt my throat tighten, but I forced a smile. So, what's the big occasion? Claire hesitated, just for a second. Then, with that same fake bright smile, she said, "You'll see." And just like that, I knew. This wasn't about me. This dinner, this whole setup, whatever was coming next, had nothing to do with me at all. I tried to ignore it. The weird tension, the stranger across the table, the way Claire had hesitated when I asked about the occasion. Tried. But when something's off, it burrows into your brain like an itch you can't scratch. And right now, my whole damn body was screaming that something wasn't right. I kept my eyes on Claire. She was chatting, laughing, playing the perfect host. But now I was looking closer. Her laugh was just a little too bright. Her movements just a little too careful. Like she was trying to act normal instead of just being normal. And then there was him. The stranger. Tall. Confident. Leaning back in his chair like he had all the time in the world. Like he belonged here. Like he wasn't a guest, but a goddamn centerpiece. And the way he was looking at Claire? It wasn't casual. It wasn't friendly. It was something else. Something intimate. Something wrong. I didn't react. Not outwardly. Just kept my expression neutral, my hands steady as I sipped my drink. But inside, my stomach was knotting itself into a fist. I needed to know who the hell this guy was. I leaned forward casually, aiming for a relaxed tone. "So, how do you two know each other?" Silence. For just a fraction of a second, the air around the table shifted, like a needle scratching across a record. Then Claire let out a short laugh, too quick, too forced. "Oh, this is Ethan. He's an old friend." Old friend. The words tasted like a lie before she even finished saying them. Ethan smiled, slow and easy. "Yeah, we go way back." "Way back." "Right." I glanced at Claire. Her hand tightened around her wine glass. I glanced at Ethan. He was watching me. Not in a challenging way, not in a friendly way. More like studying. Like he wanted to see what I'd do next. And then, just to really send my stomach into a tailspin, he reached for the breadbasket. So did Claire. Their hands brushed, and the way she pulled back, too fast, too tense, like she'd just touched an open flame, told me everything I needed to know. My throat went dry. I glanced around the table, expecting someone, anyone, to react, to acknowledge the massive, suffocating elephant in the room. But no one did. Rachel was staring at her plate like it held the meaning of life. My father-in-law was suddenly fascinated with his whiskey. Mark, my best friend, looked like he wanted to be anywhere but here. Everyone knew. Everyone but me. I forced a smile. Took another sip of my drink. Played along. But inside, I was already preparing for war. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. Something was happening right in front of me, and I was the only one who didn't know what the hell was going on. The dinner went on, but I wasn't in it anymore. My body was here. My mouth was forming words, but my brain? It was stuck on the way Claire had tensed when she touched Ethan's hand. The way she called him an old friend like the words barely fit in her mouth. And the worst part? Everyone else at this table was in on it. Rachel, Claire's sister, hadn't looked at me once since I sat down. My father-in-law was avoiding eye contact too, swirling his whiskey like he wished he could disappear into it. And Mark, my best friend of almost 20 years? He looked like he was about to throw up. It wasn't just Claire hiding something. It was all of them, and I was about to start pulling threads. I turned to Rachel first. So, how long have you guys known Ethan? She flinched. Not much, just a little stiffening of her shoulders. But I caught it. She plastered on a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Oh, a while. She trailed off and looked at Claire, like she was waiting for permission. And Claire, my wife, jumped in before she could finish. It's not that interesting, babe. Let's not bore everyone with old work stories. Work stories. First time I was hearing that. Ethan just sat there, watching, smirking, enjoying the show. I turned to Mark. What about you? You ever meet him before tonight? Mark looked like he wanted to fucking die. He rubbed the back of his neck, let out a weak laugh. I think maybe once? I dunno. Man, it's been a long week. Liar. Claire laughed, light and breezy. Babe, relax. You're overanalyzing things. Overanalyzing? I didn't say shit about her reaction when she touched Ethan's hand. Didn't bring up the weird tension. The way everyone was acting like this guy just appeared here out of thin air. All I did was ask a simple fucking question, and she was already trying to shut me down. I forced a smile. Sure, just making conversation, but inside, my stomach was twisting into knots. Because I knew now, whatever the hell was going on here, it was big. I was done playing nice. The fake smiles, the careful dodging, the way everyone at this table was pretending like nothing was off. Yeah, I wasn't buying it anymore. And Claire knew it. I could see it in the way she kept sneaking glances at me, in the way her grip on her wine glass had tightened. She wasn't relaxed. She wasn't having fun. She was waiting for me to drop it. Not a fucking chance. But then, right as I was about to press harder, her phone buzzed. And everything changed. Claire's whole body went stiff. It was subtle, barely noticeable, but I caught it. The way her breath hitched just a little, the way she hesitated before reaching for her phone. She picked it up, glanced at the screen, and went pale. Not annoyed, not surprised, scared. I didn't move, didn't react, just watched. Claire quickly tapped the screen, silencing the notification, then set her phone face down on the table. Forced a smile. Sorry, work stuff. Liar. Nobody at this table believed her, but nobody called her on it. Not Mark, not Rachel, not her dad, and especially not Ethan. Because Ethan? He was watching her so closely it made my skin crawl. Like he knew what that text was about. Like it was his. I needed to see that message. Claire turned back to the conversation, pretending everything was fine, but I wasn't listening anymore. My eyes were locked on her phone, and my mind was racing. I had two options. One, I let it go. Pretend I didn't see the panic in her face. Pretend I wasn't watching the way she and Ethan kept exchanging quick, unreadable glances. Pretend this was all in my head. Or two, I waited for the right moment. Waited for her to slip up. Because one way or another, I was going to find out what the hell was going on. I wasn't going to wait anymore. Claire thought she could just brush it off, that she could sit there, smiling, laughing, pretending like that text, whatever the hell it was, meant nothing. Fuck that. I leaned in, lowering my voice just enough so only she could hear me. Who texted you? She flinched, just a little, but I saw it. Her eyes flicked to mine, wide and startled, like she hadn't expected me to ask. Then, just as quickly, she forced a smile. I told you, babe. Work stuff. I didn't blink, didn't break eye contact. At 9:30 at night? She rolled her eyes, letting out a breathy laugh. Yes. You know how it is. People always. Let me see it. That shut her up. For a split second, I saw something flicker across her face. Something raw. Fear. Then, just like that, it was gone. Her expression hardened. Excuse me? Let me see your phone, I repeated, keeping my voice steady. Her jaw clenched. Jesus, are you serious right now? Dead serious. Across the table, Rachel and Mark had gone completely still. Even my father-in-law, who'd been pretending to focus on his drink all night, was suddenly way too interested in this conversation. And Ethan? Ethan was smirking. That smug, knowing little smirk like he was enjoying every second of this. Claire let out a sharp laugh, shaking her head. Wow. So now you don't trust me? I felt my hands tighten into fists under the table. This isn't about trust. No, it is about trust, she snapped, her voice rising. You're seriously making a scene over a goddamn text message? The air around the table shifted. I could feel it. The silent exchange of glances, the unspoken agreement that they were going to back her up. Mark, my best friend, cleared his throat. Hey man, maybe we should all just chill. No, I cut him off, eyes still locked on Claire. I'm done chilling. Her lips pressed into a thin line. I'm not showing you my phone. And just like that, I knew. I knew. Because if it was really nothing, she would have just laughed, rolled her eyes, and shown me. But instead, she was digging in, getting defensive, turning it around on me. Classic gaslighting. I leaned back in my chair, forcing a cold, humorless laugh. Right. Because I'm the bad guy here. Claire grabbed her wine, took a long sip, and didn't respond. And Ethan? Ethan was still smirking, like he'd already won, like he knew something I didn't. And that's when I realized this wasn't just about Claire hiding something. This was about them all hiding something. And I wasn't leaving this dinner without finding out what the hell it was. The table was silent. Not the kind of silence that comes after a joke falls flat. Not the kind that happens when people are too busy eating. No, this was heavy, uncomfortable. The kind of silence that meant everyone was waiting for me to drop it. Claire had turned away, swirling the last of her wine like I wasn't even sitting there. Ethan? He was leaning back, completely at ease, still wearing that smug fucking look. Rachel and my father-in-law wouldn't meet my eyes, and Mark just looked miserable. I was losing this fight. Not because I was wrong. No, fuck that. I knew I was right. I was losing because I was outnumbered. I could feel it. How the whole table had subtly turned against me. How they weren't just defending Claire, but something bigger. Something I still didn't understand. I clenched my jaw, trying to control the heat rising in my chest. If I pushed harder, they'd just double down. Play the poor Claire. Look at her husband losing his mind card. Fine. Let them think I was done. I exhaled slowly, grabbed my beer, and leaned back in my chair, forcing a smirk. Whatever. Forget I asked. Claire raised an eyebrow. Oh, that easy? I shrugged. Yeah. I mean, if there's nothing to hide, why should I care, right? She hesitated for half a second too long. Then she scoffed, rolled her eyes. Exactly. And just like that, the conversation shifted. Claire and Rachel started talking about some trip they took years ago. My father-in-law muttered something about his golf game. Mark was still looking at his drink like he was debating whether to drown in it. But I wasn't listening. I was watching, waiting. And that's when it happened. A hiccup. A single, stupid little mistake. Rachel was mid-sentence, rambling about some spa they'd gone to, when Mark, drunk, guilty-looking Mark, muttered under his breath. Not like last time. It was barely above a whisper. But the second the words left his mouth, the entire table froze. Claire went rigid. Rachel sucked in a sharp breath. Ethan's smirk vanished. And my father-in-law? He slammed his glass down hard, making everyone jump. Enough. His voice was cold, flat. Mark blinked, eyes going wide, like he hadn't even realized he said it out loud. But it was too late. I heard it. Not like last time. Last time what? My pulse pounded in my ears, my mind racing. There was a last time, and that meant This wasn't just some random betrayal. This wasn't some fling. This was something else entirely. I stared at Claire, but she refused to look at me. Rachel was biting her lip, practically sinking into her chair. Ethan was staring daggers at Mark. And Mark? He looked like he wanted to fucking disappear. I leaned forward, voice low and even. What do you mean? Not like last time? Mark swallowed. I didn't mean. Mark. His face crumpled. He opened his mouth. But before he could say anything, Claire slammed her hand on the table. Can we just fucking eat? Jesus Christ. Her voice was sharp, shaking, but it wasn't anger. It was panic. And that's when I knew. This wasn't just one lie. This was an entire goddamn web of them. And I was about to rip it apart. I wasn't backing down. Not now. Not after Mark slipped up. Not after I saw the sheer panic in Claire's eyes. I set my drink down slowly, deliberately. No, seriously. What did you mean? Not like last time. Silence. Mark's face was pale. His eyes darted to Claire, to Rachel, to Ethan, like he was looking for backup, looking for permission. And Claire? She was seething. Not at Mark. At me. Like I was the one ruining the night. Like I was the problem here. Babe, drop it. Her voice was tight, controlled. He was just talking nonsense. Mark nodded too fast. Yeah, man. I was just rambling. Liar. I could hear it in his voice, see it in the way his fingers tapped anxiously against the table. Rachel was avoiding eye contact. My father-in-law was gripping his glass so tight I thought it might shatter. And Ethan? Ethan was watching me. Not nervous. Not guilty. Curious. Like he wanted to see what I'd do next. Fine. I pushed my chair back, standing up. No, I don't think I will drop it. My voice was calm, steady. But inside, my blood was boiling. Claire shot up too. Jesus Christ, do you even hear yourself? She let out a short, bitter laugh. You're embarrassing yourself. You're embarrassing me. I stepped closer, lowered my voice. Then tell me the truth. Her jaw clenched. I am telling you the truth. No, you're feeding me bullshit. I exhaled sharply, shaking my head. You got a text, and you panicked. You and Ethan keep giving each other these looks. Everyone at this table is acting like I'm the only one who doesn't know what the fuck is going on. I turned to Mark. And you? You just happened to let slip there was a last time? I huffed a humorless laugh. So tell me, Claire. Tell me, all of you. What the hell is really going on? The air in the room was thick, heavy. Claire's hands were trembling. Not much, but just enough. For the first time all night, Ethan wasn't smirking. And then, Claire snapped. You want to know? Her voice cracked. You really want to fucking know? She grabbed her wine glass and threw it, shattering it against the wall. Rachel gasped. My father-in-law muttered a curse under his breath. Mark? He looked like he was praying for the earth to swallow him whole. But I didn't move. I just waited. Claire sucked in a shaky breath. You're so fucking desperate to find something wrong. So desperate to play the victim. But maybe, just maybe, you should be asking yourself why. The hell was that supposed to mean? She ran a hand through her hair, laughing bitterly. You think you're uncovering some big secret? Fine. Have at it. Dig all you want. Her eyes flashed, dark and furious. But don't come crying to me when you don't like what you find. My heart pounded. Not from anger. Not from rage. From something else. Something colder. Because for the first time tonight, I wasn't sure if I even wanted to know the truth. I stood there, my pulse pounding in my ears, staring at Claire like I'd never seen her before. She was daring me to push, daring me to cross a line neither of us could uncross. The worst part? She knew something I didn't. And for the first time tonight, I wasn't sure if I wanted to know. The rest of the table was dead silent. Rachel's hand was over her mouth, eyes darting between us like she was watching a car crash in slow motion. My father-in-law looked exhausted, like he'd seen this fight before and already knew how it ended. Mark wouldn't even lift his head. And Ethan? Ethan was watching her. Not me. Her. Like he was waiting for her next move. Like he was waiting to see if she'd finally say it. I took a slow, steady breath. Say it. Claire's expression didn't change. I stepped closer. You're standing there acting like you're holding all the cards. Fine. Then fucking play one. Her lips parted, just slightly. For a second, just a second. She looked tired. Then she clenched her jaw. I already told you. Her voice was quieter now. You don't want this. I let out a cold laugh. Oh, I do. I really, really do. Her fingers curled into fists. And then, just when I thought she was about to crack, Ethan sighed. Loudly. Like he was bored. Claire's head snapped toward him, eyes blazing. Don't. But it was too late. He smirked. Looked straight at me. And then, in the most casual fucking voice, he said, She never told you, did she? The room tilted. It was like the ground had been ripped out from under me, and I was falling. Claire inhaled sharply. Ethan. Shut the fuck up. But Ethan? Ethan was enjoying this. He leaned back in his chair, stretching like he had all the time in the world. Wow. So all this time, you've been playing detective, convinced she was hiding some tiny little secret. He chuckled. Man, you really don't have a clue, do you? I swallowed. My throat was dry. What is he talking about? I asked Claire. She shook her head. Nothing. He's just... Nothing? Ethan laughed. Claire, come on. He deserves to know, doesn't he? I felt sick. I turned back to Claire. Tell me. Her face had gone pale. I can't. The words hit me like a brick. Not I won't. I can't. Ethan's smirk widened. He leaned in, lowering his voice. You ever wonder why she's been so good at lying to you? He tilted his head. Why she knew exactly how to cover her tracks. I clenched my fists. Say what you mean, you smug piece of... Claire slammed her hands on the table. Enough. The room snapped into silence. Her chest was rising and falling fast. Her hands were shaking. But she wasn't looking at me. She was looking at Ethan. And for the first time tonight, I saw it. Not anger. Not frustration. Fear. Ethan grinned. Go on, Claire. Tell him. Her breath shuddered. She closed her eyes. And then, she looked at me. And the words that came out of her mouth made my blood turn to ice. Claire's lips parted. Her eyes locked onto mine, full of something raw. Something I wasn't sure I'd ever seen before. Regret? Fear? Or something worse? For a second, just a second, she looked like she wanted to run. Like she wanted to bolt from this restaurant and never look back. Instead, she whispered, I never wanted you to know. The air around us felt thick, suffocating. I swallowed hard. My voice came out hoarse. Know what, Claire? She squeezed her eyes shut. A long, shuddering breath. Then, finally, she said it. It was never just an affair. My stomach dropped. The words sat there between us, heavy and unshakable. I barely heard Rachel inhale sharply. Barely noticed Mark tensing beside me. Ethan, though? He grinned like he'd just won a bet. I took a slow step back, shaking my head. What the hell does that mean? Claire finally looked at me. And the look on her face, fuck? It wasn't guilt. It wasn't even shame. It was grief. Like she knew she was about to destroy something forever. Like she knew there was no coming back from this. My heart pounded. I tried to piece it together. Not just an affair. Then what? A double life? A whole other family? A fucking crime? I needed her to say it. I needed to hear it come out of her mouth. Claire, I rasped. What the fuck are you talking about? She opened her mouth, hesitated. Then Ethan, because of course it was Ethan, sighed dramatically. Oh, for fuck's sake. He rolled his eyes. He's already halfway there, Claire. Just tell him. Claire's hands were shaking, but she wasn't stopping him. That's when the real panic set in. Ethan leaned in, smirk curling at the corner of his mouth. And then he said it. She wasn't just cheating on you. He paused, savoring the moment. Then, voice dripping with satisfaction. She was working you. The world stopped. I felt my breath hitch. What? Ethan chuckled. Come on, man. You're a smart guy. Put it together. He tilted his head. How'd you two meet again? My blood ran cold. I tried to answer. The words wouldn't come out. Claire's eyes were glassy now, locked onto mine. Don't. Her voice cracked. Ethan, please. But Ethan didn't give a fuck. He He spread his hands, grinning like the devil himself. You think it was fate? That you two just happened to meet? He scoffed. Nah, man. You were a job. A fucking job. I felt my pulse hammering in my skull. My hands clenched into fists. Ethan leaned back, stretching, looking so damn satisfied. Oh, don't look at me like that. It's not personal. You were just, what do they call it? A mark. Mark let out a choked breath, like he was physically pained by what was happening. Rachel was biting her nails. My father-in-law was stone-faced, but I only saw Claire, my wife, the woman I built a life with, the woman who had just been exposed as a fucking fraud. I felt like I was drowning. Claire, my voice cracked. Tell me it's not true. She didn't. She just stared at me, tears running down her face. And right then, I knew. This wasn't some one-time mistake. This wasn't some affair gone too far. This had been the plan from the start, and I had walked right into it. The world around me blurred. The clinking of glasses, the low hum of conversation from other tables. It all faded into static. The only thing I could hear, feel, was the hammering of my own pulse. A job. I was never her husband, never her partner. I was her mark. I couldn't fucking breathe. Claire was crying now, silent and still, tears slipping down her face. She didn't bother wiping them away, didn't try to defend herself, didn't even move. Because what was the point? I already knew the truth. I swallowed, my throat tight. My voice barely worked. So what was the plan, huh? I laughed, bitter and hollow. You were supposed to screw me over and disappear? Take my money? My company? No answer. I turned to Ethan. And you? What the hell is your role in all this? He smirked. Let's just say I was there when it all started. He took a sip of his drink, way too casual. You were never supposed to fall in love, man. That wasn't part of the deal. My stomach dropped. I looked at Claire. Is that true? Her lips parted. Her breath shuddered. Then, in a voice so quiet I barely heard it, she whispered, Yes. My vision blurred. I took a step back, shaking my head. So what? You pretended to love me? The house, the vacations, the years. All of it was just a fucking act? She squeezed her eyes shut, a sob catching in her throat. I wanted her to deny it. I needed her to deny it. But she didn't. She just looked at me with eyes full of something broken, something desperate. It wasn't supposed to go this far, she whispered. Something inside me snapped. I slammed my hand on the table, rattling the glasses. Then why did it? My voice cracked. Why the fuck are we still here? Silence. Rachel was crying now, quietly wiping her eyes. Mark looked wrecked. My father-in-law had his head in his hands. And Ethan? Ethan just laughed. Like this was a goddamn game. You really don't get it, do you? He said, shaking his head. She was supposed to leave years ago. I turned to Claire, my hands shaking. Then why didn't you? For the first time all night, she looked at me like I was the only person in the room. Like none of them, Ethan, Mark, Rachel mattered. Like it was just us. I don't know, she whispered. And somehow that was the worst part. Because it meant part of it, some part, had been real. But not enough. Never enough. I let out a shaky breath. My entire body felt numb. I'm done, I said, voice flat. Claire flinched, like I'd hit her. But I didn't care. I turned and walked away. Out of the restaurant. Out of that fucking nightmare. Out of the life I thought was mine. And as I stepped into the cold night air, one final thought hit me. I had spent years loving someone who had never even existed. And I had no idea what the hell I was supposed to do next.